Good afternoon. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Dylan Talks Tone. Welcome to the Just Gonna Say It podcast. It is Tuesday, and we are back in our normal office doing normal Dylan Talks Tone things, making pickups, doing stuff. If you're new to the channel, we talk about guitar stuff almost every day of the week on YouTube. That's what we do. We're going to talk about a couple things today that I think you might find interesting, you might not find interesting. And if you have questions, put them in the chat over here with a bunch of question marks in front of it. And we'll try to get to those, as well as if you use a super chat, we'll just drop what we're doing. We'll answer those right away. And we'll just see what we get into here, because that's kind of what we do on Tuesdays. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters, patreon.com/DylanTalksTone, as well as the YouTube members that hit the little join button down there. Those folks kind of keep us rolling, because that's what keeps review guitars and kind of the source of all the stuff that we're going to talk about today going. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do reviews and various things. So we thank you so much for your support with that, as well as people who order stuff at DylanTalksTone.com. And because pickups is what we really do. So there you go. So I guess what we should do first. So we did this video now. It's been a week. The Gibson versus Epiphone thing. And I don't know now. Let's see. Let's look. How many... I don't necessarily care. Sorry, I got sick after Vegas, and still kind of fighting it back off. Just like a quick chest cold in and out in a day or two, but now I'm going to have this dumb cough and congestion for probably 2 weeks. It's kind of how it goes with me. So this video that we made about the old Les Paul stuff, I'm not so concerned about the views, although it did get a ton of views. It got more views than any other video in the last couple months. 301 comments, though. That's the cool part. So thanks everybody who participated in that. And the video that came out the other day, Rosewood versus Maple, about half as many comments on that one, and that video's only been out for a day. So exactly a day as of right now. So thank you so much for everybody who contributed to that video, because that's it's kind of what makes them go. It's what makes YouTube promote them. Plus, it's fun. That video was really fun for me. We're going to get into the Rosewood Maple thing here in a few minutes too, because the results of some of my polling and such, and comments and this and that, were more along the lines of what I thought they were going to be, as well as maybe surprising to many of you. So we'll talk about that in just a couple minutes too. So we took a couple more measurements. There was two things that I forgot in the Epiphone versus Gibson video, and they were very key to the entire conversation. One of the things is, and for those of you that are listening on the podcast, I will try to describe this as best I can. The dish that is milled into the body right here, so this isn't just an arch that comes down. It actually comes down and then it gets flat at the edge on a regular Les Paul. Now on the Epiphone one, it gets flat. On a real Les Paul, on a Gibson Les Paul, this shape is actually kind of dished all the way around. And on the custom shop ones especially, you can see it's almost like scooped all the way around, not flat. Where on the Epiphone ones, they're kind of just flat. The reason is because they have to laminate the body, and it's easier to laminate the body if you don't have that compound curve in there. And so the design of the body is a bit different to accommodate for that, to make it basically just easier to make and cheaper to make. Because the entire thing with the Epiphone versus the Gibson Les Paul is manufacturing costs. You know, that's really all it is. They're trying to build this thing. This thing's $699. They're trying to build it to a price. And to be honest with you, for everybody who thought I was trashing on them, if you cannot get a real Gibson, or if you have some reason that you can't get one or don't want one, get one of these. This guitar is beautiful. It is fantastic. Everything about it is fantastic. The pickups are actually pretty good too. I mean, I'm going to change them because that's what I do, but this thing is really good. We got a lot of people saying, well, you're the pickup guy, so you're going to say that the electronics suck and whatever. And I'm like, you weren't friggin' paying attention. I said, the pots are good. The wiring is good. The pickups are good. We're going to switch it because we have fun with that stuff. But the stuff's actually really good. This guitar is very good. Now, this is probably the number one thing that we had a conversation about. In the comments and on Facebook and in forums and in everywhere, there are people who are convinced that an Epiphone and a Gibson pickups are in different positions. I'm here to tell you they are not. And I'll tell you how I verified it. We use the last fret. Okay, so the scale link's got to be in the right place for the guitar to work. So we know that the last fret will be in the same place for both guitars. Okay, so same number of frets, last fret's going to be in the same place. From the center of the fret to the center of the humbucker on both guitars is exactly the same distance within a couple of thousandths. From the center of the last fret to the center of the bridge pickup is exactly the same place within a couple of thousandths. Measured it with a caliper. I have a caliper that's big enough to do that. I put the pickups back in this guitar is what I did. We did it last night during the Patreon hangout. If you are a Patreon member, I'm going to be posting that and you'll be able to watch that. Excuse me. Then we took from the center of these pins in the bridge to the center of the bridge pickup. This is the big one that everybody wants to argue about all the time. They were exactly the same within a couple of thousandths of an inch. And when I say a couple of thousandths, I don't mean 20 thousandths. I mean 4, 3. Okay? That whole thing that everybody whines about and is convinced is true is just not true. Now, if you had a crappy Epiphone from some other year, from the past, whatever, who cares? I don't care about that. When we do comparisons, we get the latest of what's going on because people want to talk about quality control. They want to talk about all the problems that they try to make up on social media. And the way we get around that is let's look at the latest example and let's see if it's real. None of the misconceptions that people had about Les Pauls versus Gibson were true. Not one. This is just a cheap Les Paul. That's all it is. It's just been built down to a price. Spec-wise, the frets are different. We talked about it. We talked about all the specs in the last video. We really broke that down. But, the main reason it sounds different is because the bridge pickup's in a wrong spot, blah, blah, blah. No, it ain't. Now, if you have some cheap thing from somewhere else, from some, Harley Benton, sorry, I have a cough, or some other, cheap manufacturer, and it's in a different spot, I can't speak to that. But what I can say is this is the normal Les Paul Epiphone that you can buy. This is not the inspired by the custom shop one. This is not anything fancy. This is not a signature model. This is nothing. This is the $699 Epiphone Les Paul. We put a link to it in the description so you can go and see what the guitar is that this is. It's exactly the same. Pickups are not in the wrong spot. Pickups are not closer together. Pickups are not closer to the bridge. None of that stuff is true. Sorry to disappoint all of you who were trying to come up with some excuse for that, but it is just not true. I think it's hilarious. Inexpensive. Yeah, it's not cheap. You're right. It is inexpensive. Some of the stuff is kind of cheap. The tuners are a little cheap. That's why we're changing them out on this guitar. I mean, they'll work fine, but they're definitely not the same. The frets are definitely cheaper. Let's see, what else? There's a couple things like that. But for most players, and here's the thing, okay? I was watching some other video about, it was from some, well, it comes up in a whole bunch of things, actually. I was watching a video about knife steel the other day, and then I was watching a video about, like the Glock 19 versus any other gun. Talking about reliability, and the bottom line is, can you get through your use case with your guitar or whatever it is? If if you have a cheap pocket knife in your pocket, and I don't, I have really nice pocket knives in my pocket. But if you get through the day and your knife does what it's supposed to do, and you go home and you throw it on the sharpener and it's sharpener for the next time, and it's great, and it gets you through your use case, then whatever you spent on that pocket knife is good enough for what your use case is. And don't let anybody tell you any different. Don't let anybody tell you that you need something better, that you need something more expensive, that you need whatever, unless you actually want it. I don't need it either, but I want it. I think it's cool. I just think it's cool. So it's the same thing with the Epiphone, when you think about, when we talk about a couple of things like that, like the tuners are kind of cheap on less expensive guitars. They kind of are. It's one of the ways they get to the price is the hardware. However, if it holds it in tune, if you can tune the guitar, and you play a couple hours a week, and every time you go to tune the guitar, it stays in tune, then what's the problem? There is no problem. And if you're the kind of guy who's not a very good guitar player, like me, who doesn't play professionally anymore, like gigging all the time, like I used to gig like twice a week, and now I don't because I'm too busy with this stuff. Well, you don't. I've had many people tell me that my guitars, I don't need an expensive guitar, and no, I don't. But I think they're cool. I just think they're cool. So don't worry, because the guitar is going to be good enough for you to do what you want to do. Any of these things, we talk about it all the time. Any of these things, all the way down to Fender Squires and that kind of stuff. It's going to do what you want it to do. Have you thought about switching the Gibson and Epiphone pickups between the two different bodies? It would be interesting to see how much the tone is in the pickups versus the other hardware. No, I don't think so, because I don't care. I don't care. Here's the thing. If you have to test it that finitely, like that specifically, then does it really matter? I keep coming back to this. And so let's talk about the rosewood versus maple thing, right? I like rosewood fretboards because I enjoy them. They feel good to me. No other reason. And I play better when I'm on something that I like. If I don't like it, I don't play as good. If I'm not as comfortable on it, I don't play as good. So, do I care? Am I going to tap on... Oh, that sounds totally warm, bro. It's like way resonant and stuff. No, I don't care. I don't care. And when you have to get that finite with things. Now, there are certain things that will make a big difference. Like, and we may do this when we do this video. So the gentleman who owns this guitar had me order, or he ordered all of the GravTech stuff. Okay, so we've got the GravTech graphite saddles. Now, this would be an interesting back-to-back comparison because um, saddles are in direct contact with the string. So, and they affect the actual vibration of the string. The string is just above the pickup. That's directly involved. So that'd be an interesting thing. And from our experience with other videos, changing a Telecaster from aluminum to steel to brass to titanium makes, you can definitely hear a difference, right? It's still kind of fiddly, like, not everybody's going to notice, but most people will. And I think this is going to be a cool experiment to do. So we will mess around with some hardware. But I don't think most things that people spend that much time worrying about I just don't think it's going to happen. Holy crap, he does sound like John Mayer. Are you not from? No, I'm not from Connecticut. I don't say R's on the end of all my A words. Do you have experience with vintage V100 guitars and how they compare to Epiphone Les Pauls? I'm not a big vintage fan. I think they are garbage. I do have experience. I do not have experience with their Les Paul copies. If you're new to the channel, you may know that I'm pretty outspoken about this. If you have to purchase one of those guitars because it's the only thing you can afford, go ahead and do it because you need a guitar to play. Everybody needs a guitar to play. If there is a way that you can buy an Epiphone or a Squier or a Gibson or a Fender or a PRS SE or a PRS, something with some actual pedigree behind it, I would encourage you to do that. If you are the kind of person who says, well, I want it because it's just as good as the other thing, we probably won't be friends. Like, I don't agree because those things are junk. And you can talk yourself into it as many ways as you want, but they're not good. I built up a vintage for one of my friends, and it took a lot of work. And I replaced everything but the body and the neck. And the frets were terrible. I had to redo all the frets. Relevel and crown. They're the same exact Chinese factory as everything else is coming out of. I'll tell you a story about that. So I met this friend of mine actually at a NAMM show. And at that NAMM show, he became a vintage artist. They actually were going to he was going to endorse their product, and they were going to send him a guitar. And he's like, can I send it to you? And then you can do it up the way I want it. And I was like, yeah, sure. That'd be fun, because I've never had experience with these things. It'd be cool. At that same NAMM show, Leslie and I were walking around, and we were looking at all of these different brands, right? And I cannot even tell you the names of them because I don't even know if any of them are in business anymore. Because what they were doing was, who do we have in the chat today? So let's say Blackstar. Let's say you take $10,000, and and you might, because you said cheaper guitars are better. I disagree. Unless it's all you can afford. Unless it's all, buy the best guitar you can, 100%. So let's say Blackstar takes $10,000 and he goes to Chinese factory A or B, right? Okay, and then who else do we have in here? Scuffed Frank. He takes 10 grand and he goes to the same factory and he's like, this is what I want, but I want the same thing, but I don't want the same thing. And then they both go to NAMM, and so they've got Scuffed Frank guitars and they've got Blackstar guitars, although it wouldn't be Blackstar, it'd be something else, because on 2 stalls apart from each other, selling exactly the same guitar for pretty much the same price with different names on the peg head, and they're just the same Chinese junk. That was what that NAMM show was. There was like 12 of them things. This bass and that bass were exactly the same thing. You could tell they came from the same factory. This vintage guitar and this other, I don't even remember the name of it. I remember vintage because I dealt with them. Um, and this other guitar over here were exactly the same guitar. I mean, like, you could tell they were the same guitar from the same factory, everything. Same packaging with just a different kind of like graphic on the box. Like, it was just like, it was all the same. And I'm like, how do you inspire people? How do you carve out your spot? How do you be a part of music culture when you're just making it worse? I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I mean, you could say the same thing about me because I make pickups, but we don't just buy parts. You know, we make this junk from scratch, and we put our own stuff. Nobody makes what we make, and I'm fairly confident in that actually, with a few of the designs we have, especially. So you know, and that's so the whole goal is to try to figure out how to make yourself a little different, how to bring value, all that kind of stuff. But all those guitars, they were all the same. They were just all the same. And it was really disappointing, actually. I'm considering a Vola. So I know the guy that owns Vola. And some of their stuff is made in Japan, and they actually have a custom shop in Texas, I think. I met him at that same NAMM show too, and he's a really cool dude. They're doing the same thing. It's any of these companies that are made overseas or in certain countries. The way this works is all you do is you show up with your checkbook. That's all you do. You show up with your checkbook and you show up with a drawing or two. And you say, look, this is what I want to make. What will it cost me? And the factory says, this is what it's going to cost you. And you do the math and you go, okay, well, the guitar is going to have to cost $8.99 if I buy it for that. Which means for $8.99, that means they're probably going to have to buy it for, I don't know, 40, 800. So they'll probably have to buy for $8.99. They probably have to buy the guitar for like $275. Okay. Um, let's say they'd have to get it shipped here for $300, which is its own battle. And they go, but I asked for this pickup and this configuration and whatever and whatever. Well, we could do that, but that guitar would then, instead of being $8.99, would have to be $10.99. All right. Well, okay. How do I decide what, and you basically just go down a checklist. You design the guitar. You don't really have a whole lot of choice. You just what it's made of or any of that kind of stuff in a lot of those factories. Now, some of them you can get really custom. Some of the ones in Japan you can get really, really, really custom. But those are not $8.99 guitars. Those are like the Vola guitars are not cheap, right? Those are more expensive. They're not expensive though. So it just depends on the level of excuse me, the level of customization that you want. But all you have to do is show up with a couple of drawings and a checkbook, and you too can be a guitar builder. Only you're not. You're a guitar importer. Yeah. Junk Pickups Incorporated. Yeah, that's for sure. Let's see. World Music makes good stuff. You just have to know what you want. Yeah, see, well, that's the thing. You pay more. That's what you do. You just have to go over there and the way things work with that too is the MOQs for that stuff. So the minimum order quantities change. So depending on the quality of instrument you want and the materials and where they have to get materials from. Like if you want the thing made out of any old plywood, um, I'm joking. You know, any old whatever. Um, the MOQs will be lower because it's easier for them to source all that stuff. If you want something really specific, then what I mean by that is minimum order quantities. So they might tell you if you order 300 or 500 guitars, it'll be this price. But if you want this other material, you're gonna have to order 1,000 guitars or 1,500 or 2,000 guitars. So all that stuff it's a sliding scale depending on, it's kind of all over the place. But the bottom line is, they're not. It's just kind of cookie cutter, all the same, and that's why. And honestly, Squires are the same, but Squires are at least a little bit. Well, they put a little more thought into them, and same thing with Epiphone. So, and they are actually designed by Fender. So, you know, the Squire stuff. So I always encourage people to buy from the legacy brands that have, especially for students, for new players, for gifts, the legacy brands that have, you know, some name recognition in the country where you live, because that could be different. You know, like if you live in Japan, it could be another brand. It could be, you know, Takamine or Ibanez or you know, or it could be Fender, because Fender's huge in Japan too. It could be Gibson, I don't know, or Epiphone. It just depends where you live. But in the United States, buy a Fender product, buy an Epiphone product, buy a Squier product, buy a Gibson product, buy a PRS product. And there will be many people that will get in because they do on every freaking video. I don't know why you're shilling for the big brands, these who are just trading on their name. I don't know if you know what trading on a name means, but it means that you've had a reputation for 100 years and that's it. You're the guy. And the reason is because it's good stuff. And you can get in the comments of any person on any Facebook group in any forum and find bad stuff about any brand. But the amount of talking crap about particular brands like Gibson or Fender or whatever is far higher, but that doesn't make the incidence of quality control any higher. People just talk about it more. So, you know, use your discretion with that stuff. Let's see. With modern production methods and factoring in the astronomical difference in labor costs, the onset of significant diminishing returns on guitars is lower than it ever has been in history. I would say I disagree. It depends what's important to you, but if you're objectively looking at quality of materials, because the only reason I know I disagree with this is because I'm imagining, I could be wrong, assuming that, who's this? Dave L. I'm assuming that your magic number is somewhere in the $800 area or $1,200 or $1,500 area, and I disagree with that. Many people who say those things in comments, and I could be assuming wrong, so get in the comments and correct me if I'm wrong. But many people who assume that, what you just said, the diminishing returns, they'll set their diminishing return number at like $1,200. It's just not right. Quality of an instrument, quality materials continues to improve when we're talking about the selection of wood. And we should say, we're not talking about tone wood here. We're not talking about the fact that the wood comes from America versus comes from Fiji, comes from wherever. We're not talking about that, because a lot of people got really bent out of shape about that in the last video I made about that. That's not what I mean. The actual wood selection. So if you look at this guitar is not this pretty. This guitar has actually got a really ugly top on it. And they just put a laminate over the top of it. Same thing with the back. It's not this pretty. It's just a laminate. You know, it's like a countertop. So yeah, it's maple under there, but it doesn't look good. And if you buy a Squire or if you buy something, there'll be knots in the neck. There'll be all that kind of stuff. So wood selection, component selection, quality of the frets, the actual metallurgic quality of the frets. I'm not talking about like the fretwork. I'm talking about the actual quality of the metal in the frets, which is huge on a guitar, and people don't think about that very much, I don't think. And I'm not talking about $200 stainless frets that come on a Harley Benton either. I'm talking about stuff that's done properly. The work that goes into it, no matter where the country, no matter labor costs. We're not talking about labor costs. Purely materials. A really good guitar is going to be $2,500 to $3,000 based on materials alone. Now you put labor in there, it's going to be that. Can you do that cheaper in Japan? Probably. Can you do that cheaper in China? Definitely. Do you want to? That's up to you. That's not up to me. Everybody feels differently about it. Are you okay with that being done in Indonesia? That's up to you. That's not up to me. That's a personal choice. Sometimes, I have some Schecters. I have some Indonesian stuff. I think it's great. It's good stuff. But when you start to look at the actual materials that make a guitar and the quality of them, about $2,500 to $3,000 is where it's at right now. And for everybody who disagrees with that, if you look at the inflation numbers, starting with when guitars came out in the 40s and the 50s, guitars are actually cheaper now than they were when they first came out, when you look at inflation. So it's, the fact that stuff is getting more expensive is the fact that stuff is getting more expensive. People that say that the CEO of Gibson's sitting back and making all this money, it's just not true. I challenge you to be a CEO of a company for 90 days for $15 an hour, and you'll not want to do that, you know? Um, yeah, because guitars have not gotten more expensive. Um, it's a veneer. Don't get it twisted. Sometimes the wood is good, but you never know because it's under the veneer. It's not true. It's not true, and I'll tell you why it's not true. Because the person who's selling the lumber, this is about money. Okay, this is about money. They're not hiding good wood under veneer. Okay, that's stupid. Uh, the guy who is at the sawmill, who is cutting, because I have a friend who actually owns the sawmill in Fiji that's cutting all of the wood for Gibson, for PRS, not for PRS yet. So, oops. Martin, a couple other places. Anyways, I talked to him on the phone about this the other night. We just had a conversation about this. They're not putting fancy wood under veneer. And here's why. The guy that owns the sawmill wants to get the most yield out of every piece of wood. So if he sees a crappy piece of wood, that's going to Epiphone. You know why? Because he only gets to charge $20 for it. If it's a good piece of wood, he goes, well, I'm going to send that one to Gibson because I get to charge $60 a piece for it because it's a better piece of wood. So he's not going to take a $60 piece of wood and sell it to the guys that are going to put it under a veneer for $20 because he just lost $40 for no reason. So that doesn't happen. And there's literally people checking that stuff. There's literally like a guy who's standing there picking wood. And this is going to go over here because this is B grade and this is A grade. And when they say triple A and double A and all that stuff, that ain't no joke. Like there's somebody who's like checking all this stuff. So they're not going to put fancy wood under a veneer and try to like sneak one under your nose or nothing because they could have made more money if they did that. If they did, it was a 100% a mistake. It was never on purpose. Um, Never on purpose. Yeah. Let's see. Is your 2016 Fender American Strat not a good guitar? I bet that's an awesome guitar. I bet that's a great guitar. Let's see. I'm still trying to go through here. Yeah, so what I tell people is um, with this stuff, buy the best guitar you can, right? Pretty easy. Buy the best guitar you can. And if and if it's and not just the best. I was thinking about that too. I was watching this is actually a radio control car channel on YouTube. And he never talks about specs. He's just like, if you want to see all the techno stuff, here it is. I'm going to put a link to it in the description. And I was like, if I did that in a video, it would never fly. People would be so mad at me if I did that. And I'm like, but you know what? It's true. The technical stuff does not matter on a guitar, especially if you're new. Just go buy something you like. It's only when you play for a little while and somebody on the internet tells you need to have something that you don't have that you start to look at specs. And here's how I know that. Because we just did this whole survey about Rosewood versus we did it in the comment section on the Rosewood versus Maple video. And there were a couple people who still held to the yeah, it's the tone, man, like Maple's brighter and Rosewood's darker. I'm like, duh, because dark, brighter, and dark. Anyway, but 99% of everybody on that's why I said 300 comments on that video. Everybody was like, because I like how it feels, I like how it looks. They were making what is one of the most controversial things in all of guitardom, that decision based on how it felt and how it looked. No technical reason. No tone tapping. No stupid A/B testing. Wait, it's not the right pickups. That doesn't count kind of videos. Nothing. Why do you buy a guitar with maple on it? Why do you buy a guitar with rosewood on it? Because I like the way it feels and I like the way it looks. Okay, good enough. Why'd you buy that Squire instead of that Squire? I don't know. I thought it was cool. Oh, you didn't care that the frets were this many thousandths versus. No, it was cool. It's a cool guitar, man. That one didn't come in sunburst, and I wanted a sunburst. And the other model didn't come in it. So I spent an extra $150 on this Squire instead of that one because it came in sunburst. I thought it was cool. And I kind of like the binding on it too. When you have real conversations with guitar players, that's how they talk. They do not sit there and talk about, well, I weighed them. And so the weight of this one was 3 ounces more than this one. And I tapped on it and it just was like totally way more resonant, bro. And I'm like, well, did you do a setup on it? No. Well, why did you tap on it then? Why did you think it was so resonant? The reason it's resonant is because the bridge is rattling. Like, we need to fix that. Be reasonable. If the Epi factory accidentally got a good piece of maple with their normal tops, would they not simply shift it over to the line that's slicing veneer from wood with good-looking tops? Nope. No, they would not change anything. They would literally it would just chunk, 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 chunk. That's, nope. Have to buy a traditional Strat. Must have one. What's the best USA made Strat? If you want to buy a good traditional Strat, I've got one for sale. I built it. Well, we built it. I built it. Yeah. we've got more information coming on that in a couple weeks. My favorite Strat right now, though, is the American Class Vintage 2 series of Strats and Tellys. That's my favorite. It's the best reproduction of a vintage guitar that they're doing right now, and it's great. It's really, really, really good. I have one of the Tellys, and it's my favorite Telly I've ever had. And that Strat in that same series, the American Vintage 2, is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. Let's see. Yeah, I love that American Vintage 2 stuff. Cletus Christ. PRS makes great guitars. I don't play them, don't like them. They seem dorky to me. It's okay to simply like or dislike guitars just because. You know, I wish people would get that through their friggin' thick heads, man. Um, I I'm the same way. The guitars that I own, it's because I like them. And if there's a guitar here that I don't have, it's because I don't care about it. I don't. It's got to suit my fancy, like you gotta. It's like everything else. It's knives. It's whatever pistols I buy because I really collect pistols more than rifles, and like that kind of thing. Like that just doesn't interest me that much. I just kind of walk past it. Not because it's not good. It's probably amazing. I don't know. I don't really care. It just doesn't interest me that much. And um, and also there's a mentality of and I know that economics falls into this, right? Like you can only afford what you can afford, right? So, but there's a tipping point with economics, with personal economics, and it has to do a lot with your own personal mental state and how you were raised and everything. I was always raised uh, to make something of myself. I was always This is why I've been an entrepreneur since I was 17 years old. I've always owned my own business. I've always made my own way, and I've always been pretty good at it. I've sucked at a couple of them, but I've been pretty good at it because I put the work in. Um, and I've never been a person who says I can't afford that. That's too expensive for me. I will never be able to have that. I just have never been that person. So mentally, it's very difficult for me when somebody's like, I want this guitar to be just as good as this other guitar. Well, it won't. It can't. It's impossible for a Harley Benton to be just as good as a Les Paul. It's actually impossible for a Harley Benton to be just as good as an Epiphone. It's just impossible. It's not possible. Can you make yourself feel good enough about playing the guitar to play it instead of? Yes, you can. But that's you. That's not the guitar. It's all about contentment. It's all about what you want out of the thing. And it's all about patience and whether you're going to save up or not. It's taken me till, well, I don't talk about my age on the internet, but I will tell you I've been playing for 40 years and I just got my first Les Paul this year. It's taken me that long to be in a position where I could spend $3,000 on a guitar. It's the most expensive guitar I've ever bought. Even doing this for a living, that's the most expensive guitar I've ever bought. I mean, well, actually, no, my carbon fiber acoustic was the most expensive guitar I ever bought. They were within a couple $100 of each other, but they were also 4 or 5 years apart to pull that off. And I actually had to sell a bunch of stuff to get my carbon fiber one. So, we're all kind of in the same boat. But I think the willingness to dedicate yourself to the hobby that you supposedly love should put you in a frame of mind to have the thing because it's cool that you want, instead of making excuses for yourself. Like, instead of making excuses for the instrument, instead of, you know, now if you truly like it, that's cool. That's totally fine. And if you're totally happy with it, that's fine. I think the thing that bugs me is the people that make excuses like, you know, well, this is just as good as that. No, it ain't. Just accept it. It's not. That's why we made this video. That Epiphone's not as good as a real Les Paul. It's just not. 100%. It's not. It's a really good guitar. I'm not going to discount it there. It's a fantastic guitar. But it's not as good as Les Paul. So stop saying it. Stop thinking it. Stop trying to get other people to think it. Don't. And buy some new pickups for it. Make it sound better if that's something that you want to do because you have one. Or because it's something that you're happy with and you want to play it like that. Just do it. But don't do that anymore. Nobody walks around and it's like, hey man, my Volkswagen Golf is just as good as a Porsche 911. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. It's not. Well, I mean, they're both made by Volkswagen AG, so it's like pretty much the same thing. It has two doors just like a Porsche 911. No, it does not. No, it doesn't. Nope. Just bringing some human factor into this thing. We're all just people talking about guitars, right? You know, IU York, whatever your name is. Sorry, I didn't mean to mispronounce your name. I was looking at a Sterling by Music Man last week, and I almost bought it. I was like, this is actually a really good guitar. I like that. What's the funky one that looks like a trapezoid? It's a signature guitar for St. Vincent. I love that thing, and that's one of those guitars where I'm like, I'd love to have the real thing, but they're like $3,000, you know. And I'm like, it's so weird that I don't know if I want to spend $3,000 for it. So maybe I'll get the Sterling version. And it's really cool. I almost bought it actually. It's a really cool guitar. Let's see. A Ford Probe is not a Mazda RX-7. That is exactly right. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Okay, you've convinced us that your $3,000 Les Paul is better than an Epiphone Les Paul. You know, I don't care about that. I don't. My goal is to not convince anybody of anything when it comes to that, because I know that human beings are going to think whatever they're going to think, um, and I don't care. That's the other thing. I think guitar players spend way too much time concerned with what other guitar players think of their stuff. And it's very evident because you can go on Facebook or you can go in one of the Facebook groups or in a forum, and it'll be, "I just bought this guitar. What do you think?" Well, if you already bought it, why? Why do you care? You like it. That's all that matters. But that's not what happens. Um, Therefore, also speaking to the same thing, I give zero crap about what anybody thinks of any of my guitars. I know that most people don't like what I play. I know that they don't like my gear, and I kind of just don't care. I just like it. I just like it. I like pink guitars. Nobody else likes pink guitars, but I do. I think they're cool. I sold my purple one, shipped it out yesterday, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. If it sounds good, it sounds good. Thoughts on Tokai? Those are those are interesting. Everyone I've ever played weighed 1,000,000 pounds. Um, I am not a big fan. I will just tell you, I've never been a big fan of. Uh, well, will never be on the train of Bernie's, Tokai's, um, Ibanez's, whatever all the lawsuit Les Pauls are, which isn't really even a thing because they actually never had any lawsuits during that time period when those guitars were made. So that's a whole farce, anyways. So they're worth way more than they're not as worth as much as everybody wants to think they are. They're just old guitars, and they're all boat anchors, like every one of them. I've worked on. I had a friend here in town. This was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I used to do repairs. When I was first getting started, it was, well, 10 years ago, I guess. It was when I was first getting started making pickups. Obviously, we were just getting started, and so to supplement it, I was doing, like local repairs, and of course, I would do all the installs locally and stuff. So I worked on a lot of guitars. And I got a buddy who's in town here, who's a Les Paul collector, and he has all kinds of vintage Les Pauls and all kinds of custom shop Les Pauls. But for about 2 years, he went on this whole streak of buying all of these Japanese Les Pauls and all of these copy Les Pauls, like from the '70s and stuff. Some brands I can't even remember the names of them. And he would bring them to me, and we would put new pickups in them, and we would do various things. And I'm gonna tell you, not one of them was good. Not one. Were they a playable instrument? And you could go, oh, this is cool. Oh yeah, this is kind of neat. Yes, they were that cool. Were they cool because nobody else had one? Yes, you could say I have this and you don't, and it's cool. Was it a good guitar? Not one of them. They were super heavy. The pickups all sucked. They were just all terrible. Um, and it was really hard to find a good one anyway because nobody took care of them when they bought them new. But they were all really heavy, and they just were just kind of dead. They were just, I don't know, they were just boat anchors, all of them. I probably worked on probably a dozen of them over a year and a half or 2 years, and they're just all garbage. I would never buy one, not ever buy one. What about, saw somebody ask about heritage. So when I bought my Les Paul, when I was shopping for my Les Paul, I actually Leslie and I both went in a room with two Heritages and two Les Pauls, and whatever the HS 150 or whatever one is, like, comparable one. I can't remember the brand name, the numbers, but um, and they were really good. They were beautiful. Were they as good as a Gibson? Not really. I mean, they were. No, I think it's just because they weren't a Gibson. I think they were good. And if you want to own one, like now that I have a Gibson, I would own a Heritage, if that makes sense. Because, you want to have one of everything if you can. um, and I would totally own a Heritage now that I have a Gibson. But I would not have one instead of one. Quality wise, they're really nice. Um, you could tell that they were not. Um, you could tell the manufacturing process was different. I'll just say that. Not better, not worse, just different. When you look at the edge of how the wood was finished, and like even around the cavities and stuff, you could tell differences. It wasn't bad. It wasn't better. The Gibson sounded better, and you'll never be able to sell it. That's like a Gibson. You know what I mean? I don't sell guitars really, my own, but um, that. So now that I have a Gibson, I'll probably buy a Heritage at some point because I want one, but not instead of it. You're missing the point here. Gibsons smell better. Dude, that's 100% true. That new Modern Light thing's pretty cool. Moserites are cool. They're neat guitars. Let's see. Oh, it's about time to get out of here, actually. All right. Cool, you guys. Yeah, I wouldn't buy one of Heritage's aged guitars for sure. I would just buy their I'd buy their normal shiny one. I think their aging attempt thing is not as good. Um, like the guitar I played, it had like a closet classic finish on it, but the pickups, all the hardware was like brand new shiny, so it didn't match really. The bursts were prettier on the Gibsons than they were on the Heritages. Like the paintwork was better when it came to the application. Um, things like that. Like I would get a Gibson instead, but you know, somebody's gonna get in the comments and say that I'm some sort of Gibson apologist, but I I just don't see, and I see a lot of guitars. I see what's funny about it is I see a lot of guitars in real life. This is what I do for a living, and I and I don't mean this to sound like I'm smarter or better than anybody else because we're all just people trying to do this. But I know I see and have my hands on and am exposed to more guitar stuff than the average person who just hangs out in their favorite Facebook groups. And I know that all of these guitars are great. Just go buy the one you want. Just go buy the one you want. And if you don't like the pickups, call me because we'll make it sound better. I got to ship a bunch of humbuckers tomorrow. And then we got a bunch of P90s going out. We sold in the last 4 days like 18 P90s or something. It's ridiculous. Everybody's been wanting P90s again. And everybody's going to want P90s more because I've got a project coming up with Texas Toast that I think you guys are going to dig. A new guitar. So super, super cool. Thanks for hanging out. It's been fun. I guess we'll see you on Thursday night.